Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Opalewski, who is going to lead us again today in our topic. How are you today, John?
Hey, Jim, I'm good. I'm excited about today's subject,
Yeah,
implementing
me too.
a succession plan. In
Yeah,
259, we started this conversation last week, and if you didn't get a chance to hear last week, you might wanna listen to that as well. We hope
yeah,
that these two sessions are going to be extremely useful to you and helpful to you.
yeah,
It's my contention, Jim, that one of the most vulnerable times in an organization's life is when it is transitioning from its current senior leader and passing the baton to the next one.
yeah.
Uh,
Huge.
when a transition is well planned, when pastoral and staff and board leadership have the space to map out this shift
Yeah,
without feeling pressure uh, being thrown into the equation,
yeah.
they're more likely to have positive outcomes.
Yes.
Now, you and I
Yeah,
have seen transitions, senior leader transitions that have gone well, and they all have similar elements to
yeah,
them. They're well planned, they're well thought out, they don't happen
yeah,
in a hurry,
yeah.
and they find wisdom in the multitude of counselors, and
Yes.
so you should be thinking if you're a pastor, you should be thinking about your successor long before you believe you should.
Yes.
Most pastors are, like they think about that and they don't give themselves enough time. They don't give themselves enough
Mm,
space. Last week, we talked about
yeah,
how do I know if a transition might be coming?
yeah.
Today, we're going to talk about, hey, I know it's coming.
Right.
What do we do? How do we manage and navigate this
Right. What's that even look like? Yeah.
process? And so I'd like to just to hear your thoughts on the general topic, Jim, and then we'll dive into some really practical stuff together
Yeah.
today.
I just generally, I would just echo how important this is because we've all seen what happens to decades of work
Mm,
in months of transition that doesn't go well. And so, how do we prepare ourselves? How do we prepare our successors? How do we prepare our people? How do we prepare our
right,
boards and budgets and pulpit committees? How to get the right. You talked about multitude of counselors.
right.
Three guys that all look the same might not make the same decision that 10 guys and gals that don't all look the same demographically or whatever. They might have a better picture of what the church actually needs. And
That's
so
right.
things like that, just little insights that would make a huge difference during this that I hope we get to bring out today for everybody.
Okay. So when we coach pastors through this process, there are two questions that almost every time emerge.
Yeah.
Here
Yeah.
we go. Here's the first
Yeah.
question. How do I deal with the emotion
Yeah.
of this transition?
Mm.
How do I handle that nagging sense almost of burnout that comes with all of the transition I'm facing and at the same time stay productive
Yeah.
with the role I'm actually being paid for?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, that mental hurdle, Jim, is hard for most pastors to leap over because they feel they're being disingenuous. They feel they're being unfaithful to their calling. And
Mm.
one of our guys said, it seems like everything I'm working on is temporary. Like
Yeah.
everything's in
Yeah.
flux, and I want relief from that. And
Yeah.
and the answer to that is it's really hard to be in the middle of a transition. It just
Yes.
is a hard being in the middle is
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
because your feet are somewhere and your head and your heart are
Yep.
beginning to find themselves somewhere else.
Yes.
And if you're a good person, you care, there's going to be this dissonance. It's going to
Yeah.
bother you. And so, here's how we help pastors with this one. We say, look, you do your best to pay attention to your current role while planning your exit.
Hmm.
And I like to think of it as an 80-20 approach, Jim,
Okay.
that you're going to take 20% of your time to focus on the transition and 80% of your time still on the current role, at least to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once you get closer to the actual transition, those percentages are going to shift. They're going to
Hmm.
change. But for so many
Yeah.
leaders,
The start.
there's just this mental challenge. Like, you mean I
Yeah.
have to take some percentage of my time every week
Yes.
and focus what's next? And I say, absolutely. That's not
Yes.
disingenuous. That's not unspiritual.
Yeah.
That you 80% of you is really probably great, that, and that's
Yeah.
enough to help the congregation stay healthy while you're considering this next move. Now, I want to stop there,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I there's a mental picture I get of a man getting off of a dock into the boat. If he puts 50% of his weight on the boat and 50% of the weight on the dock, 100% of him will fall in the lake. There's a certain progression. So that 20%, putting 20% of your weight on that front foot going into the boat is a great start. And it's going to be 30, 40, 50, 80, 100%. But that
Right,
thought of, I can't stand on the dock and get in the boat, and I can't stand in the boat and stay on the dock. There's got to be some shifting of my weight. Some inertia will come with that percentage. Some
right.
progress will be made. Some things will be exciting. You need to be excited about the future. If you're going to get off the dock and into the boat, you have to be excited about
That's
where the
right.
boat's going. And I think that's where we see a lot of people kind of land in the lake because they they do that too long, if that makes sense. Or they change
Right.
their mind. I've changed my mind. I'm staying on the dock. No, I'm jumping in the boat. So to do it well, I love that you're saying 20% because that's enough progress to see something you can look forward to without really beginning to neglect what you're doing.
That's right. And I will say this, that if you are in the middle of this season, or and let's say you're at the beginning of this season, this is transition is something you'll have to work on every
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
You can't work on it one week and then you put it on the shelf for 6 weeks. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
something that you just carve out time
Yeah.
every week and you
Yeah.
say, I'm going to think, I'm going to journal, I'm going to
Yeah.
start talking to my wife about this,
Yep.
to my husband about this, if I'm a
Yep.
female lead pastor or female pastor, um,
Yeah.
and you work consistent. I guess what I'm trying to say here is be consistent. If you
Yeah.
apply 20% on a consistent basis, you will get amazing clarity over a period of time, and the Lord will
Yes.
help you figure out, hey, you're not done here yet. Hang in there. Or
Yeah.
no, I'm actually setting you up for a change.
Yeah.
So, so this, but the emotion of it
Yeah.
is real, and it's taxing. And
Yeah.
so, Pastor, how
Yeah.
you deal with the emotion, first, there's just this mental shift you have to make that, hey, at 20% of my time, I'm going to be thinking about the future.
Yeah.
Um, that's it. But you need support during that time. I mean, it's just one of our guys on our team just transitioned. It was a 2-year process for him to transition from being the lead pastor
Wow.
to the next person being the lead pastor.
Right.
And again, I don't want to sound, I'm not bragging. I want to prove a point. He said to me, John, your steady voice during those 2 years made all the
Yeah.
difference. And it could have been
Yes, it
any
does.
one of our coaches in that scenario.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
my point is, he needed somebody who didn't have a horse in the race, who
Right.
really didn't care whether he stayed or he went to something else, but was
Hmm.
just there to help him think through and process and make good decisions. So,
Yes.
so this first question, how do you deal with the emotion? You first of all, you got to make that mental shift. And secondly, you don't deal with it by yourself. There's
Hmm.
just too much going on there for you to process it all to yourself. Any other
Yeah.
thoughts on that, Jim, before we jump into the
Nope.
second one? Okay.
No, that's
So
good.
so here's the second one, and this one's a little sticky, or it's a
Yeah.
little dicey. Question two. This almost every time we get asked this: do I remain
Yeah.
as part of the congregation, or do I move on somewhere else?
Yeah. What do you
Man.
think?
Well, I
I
think
mean,
the
I've seen it
answer
both
is
ways.
I have two, and I think the answer
Yeah.
this is a little complex.
Yeah.
But I would say this, check with your spouse first.
Yeah.
If they want to move on, pretty much end a discussion, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
most likely, if your spouse says, I'm out, I've had enough, I'm done,
Yeah. Yeah.
then I
Which I
don't
said,
know how much prayer you need. I mean, you should pray about that together. But
yeah.
but if they want to move on, I think pretty much that's an indicator that you should move
Yeah.
on. But should you get past that step and your spouse says, "Well, I'm open. I'd, I might like to stay," then you have to get with the new pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if the new pastor wants you to leave, pretty much I think again the discussion's over.
Yeah.
There's no benefit in you declaring war with the new
No.
guy coming in.
Oh,
And so in those, get our book Good and Goodbye, right? That we wrote
yeah.
together and
Yeah.
leave as graciously as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But if they're open to the idea of you staying, then here are some things I think you and that pastor and the board
Yeah.
should think about together and think through together. So I'm just going to start listing some of these, and Jim, I'd love you to
Yeah.
jump. Here's the question that the exiting pastor and the new lead pastor need to ask. Are we both healthy enough to handle this type of arrangement?
Yeah. Yeah. And secure enough and
There you go.
humble enough. And yeah, because things are going to change and people are going to come to you, the retiring pastor, the leaving pastor, and say, well, we don't like this. And man, you don't dare lead a rebellion against your successor. That would be
Well,
an
God
undefensible
will not
position.
smile. He will not
Yeah.
smile on that very favorably. And that really
Yeah.
leads to the next question you have to work through with the incoming pastor is, can we outline and maintain proper boundaries?
Hmm.
There's a lot that we could talk about there, but let me give you just one.
Yeah.
Like how, and you mentioned this, Jim, how will we handle people who want to do an end run around the new guy
Yeah. Yeah.
and come to you?
Yeah.
How are you going to handle that? And you have to talk that through
Yes.
and maybe put it in writing.
Oh,
When
yeah.
X
Yeah.
happens, Y will occur.
Yeah. Right.
And
Every time.
right. And so I think that's a question you'll have to work through. Here's a
Yeah.
question that if you're the exiting pastor, you are going to have to really spend some time thinking about, can you handle not being the guy anymore,
Yes.
the boss anymore? Can you function in a non-decision making
Yeah.
capacity?
This would be really hard for me. My family joke is that I'm not a control freak, but I am a freak that needs a lot of control. And that's the way we manipulate the language to make me feel better about myself. But yeah, it's funny. Last Thursday night we had a big youth outreach, and these three guys came and did rap music, and I'm like, I had to leave. Like I can't stand it. To me, rap music is like music for people with no musical talent. I just can't. It's offensive to me. I don't like it. I thought I sound just like the generation or two before me that didn't like the choruses. They only like the hymns. And I thought, oh,
Right.
I'm becoming that guy. And can I stick around? I mean, if I retire tomorrow and the next pastor brings in rap music as part of worship, like I brought in choruses as part of worship,
Yeah,
how would I handle that?
that's
And
right.
I, in other words, you better be settled in the fact that you're here to do whatever God is now doing,
That's
not,
right.
you know, if you stay in the church's role is no longer to honor you in that sense of whatever you want. You're the leader. It's your vision. It's your job is now
Right.
to honor the leadership, and that could be more challenging than I think we're might be prepared for. I
Right.
just share this last thought, but my predecessor founded the church. He was here for 33 years. After about 5 years of being here, he pulled me aside and he said, when you beat my record of 33 years, he was one of those,
Yeah.
arthritic, twisted finger in your face guys,
And,
wonderful man. And he said, when you beat my record of 33 years, I want you to leave this town and never come back again. I said, why? He said, well, watching you pastor this church has been the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Now,
mm,
why is that? And this is his explanation. He said, Jim, it's like dying, but instead of going to heaven, you stick around and watch the jerk your wife marries. So just don't do that to yourself. He said, if you treat this church better than I did, I just hate you for it. And if you don't treat it the way I think you should, I just hate you for it. And
Mm,
it's just too hard. But he, to his
yeah.
credit, he did it. He was a, we had our private conversations, but in public, no one would ever know that F.E. Burke wasn't in full agreement with every change that I know that he hated.
Yeah.
But he understood his role. And because of that, it worked.
That's right. And so there's so much
Yeah.
to be thoughtful of here. And you guys, you and the new guy coming on, a new gal coming on, you may start out well, and along the way you find out, man,
Mm,
this just is not
yes.
working.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think maybe here's something I didn't plan to say, but it just kind of popped in my mind. Maybe there needs to be
Mm,
like a 90-day kind of check in and say, how's this going? Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and if we start to see things going sideways, then we'll exit.
Yeah.
We'll get out of the
Yeah.
way. And
You
I'll
know, what my
say,
professors did just to consider
yeah,
is
go
he
ahead.
was gone for the winter. I'm going to take off for the winter.
Yeah.
Have a good time leading. I'll see you in the spring. And that really was helpful to me because as you're making
Mhm.
these changes, before he left, people kind of look and say, "Are we going to make these changes?" And I remember one time calling out somebody. I said, "And by the way, you don't have to look at Pastor Burke anymore. He's retired. I'm the pastor, so this is the vision of the church." And I
Yeah.
kind of made a joke out of it, but it was hard to make changes with him in the room because every change almost felt like if I wasn't
Mhm.
careful, it was dishonoring his legacy, which was not my
Yeah.
intention. But we wanted to
Right.
change. So I think even that take 3 months off. Go take the sabbatical you should
Yeah.
have taken 10 years ago and come back in 90 days and you'll be welcomed back differently. Sorry to interrupt you, but that was my thought. Give it
No,
time.
that's good. No, it's a great thought. And it really led into what I was going to say next. It says, even if you end up staying, my suggestion, and this is just my suggestion, okay? This is my opinion,
Yeah.
and I'm basing this on seeing hundreds of these scenarios. So it's
Yeah.
it's actually a data-informed opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
that I think leaving for a season so the congregation can bond with their new pastor
Yes. Very important.
is important. And again, that's my opinion. It's not the law.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel I've seen this in both of the worlds I've been privileged to work in, the church world
Yeah.
and the corporate world, where there is this departure of the former leader.
Yes.
It people just bond quicker with
Yes.
the new leader. So let me give
Yeah.
you quickly an example of a succession process here. And Jim,
Okay.
there
Yeah.
is no way we're going to be able to do this in the next 10 minutes
Okay.
or do justice to it. Let me put it
Okay.
that way in the next
Yeah.
10 minutes. So we're just going to give you the 50,000 foot
Yeah.
view here of an example.
Yeah.
So, um, so when you know that transition is happening. Okay, well, that's
Okay.
done. We know it's happening. I think that the first thing you got to do is sit down with your staff and sit down with your leaders and start
Yeah.
talking about timeframes.
Yeah.
Here's kind of the plan. Here's the high level plan. Here's the high level timeline, and then let them poke holes in it to
Mm,
identify gaps and
yeah.
make some adjustments to that plan. Secondly, so important, work with the existing leadership, your board, your staff, to clarify vision and values,
Yeah.
strengths and weaknesses of the organization,
Yeah.
and the mood of the congregation
hmm
relative to this upcoming transition and
Yeah.
response. And sometimes that is going to be anticipatory, like,
hmm
how is the congregation going to latch onto this?
Yeah.
And sometimes the congregation knows way in advance that this is coming. But it's important to take their temperature, so to speak,
Yeah.
to identify the mood. Because look, it's not just about the leadership transition; it's about the impact on the congregation,
Yeah.
on the members of the church you lead. So work with your leadership to talk about vision and values. Make sure that's crisp, clear, strengths and weaknesses. Where are we vulnerable? What
Right.
do we need to shore up
Yeah.
during this season of transition? And then pay attention to the mood of the congregation.
Yes.
Thirdly, meet with the staff and board to answer questions, provide resources, and support. So here's what I
hmm
mean by that. Here's a good question. I think a board and a staff and the exiting pastor should ask and answer. What does success look like for this transition process?
Good. Yeah.
What what will we call it? What will success be?
Yeah.
And write it down.
Yes. Good.
Here are the success factors. If these 5 things happen or these 8 things happen, that's a good transition.
Right.
Uh, Assemble the intercessors.
Hmm.
Succession is a spiritual and an organizational issue. It's both.
Good. Yeah. Good.
Collaborate on communication, your
Yeah.
plan. Communication is a strong factor always in organizational life. It is a critical factor in the success of a transition.
Yeah.
So communication to the leadership team, communication to the congregation, communication to the community.
Yeah.
If you've been there for a long time, there's community impact with
Yeah.
your transitioning from the role. You're going to have friends in the city government. You're going to have friends
Yeah.
at schools. You're going to have friends. You're probably going to be friends with the police department and the fire department.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't ignore those folks.
Yeah.
Communicate what is going on, and then the last thought I have on this one, Jim, and then again, I'm firing these away pretty
Yeah.
quick, but I'd love
Do
to
it.
just hear you come back to me with some stuff. I think that part of a great transition plan is a strategy to help the exiting pastor and the new pastor to maintain their footing,
Yeah.
because their emotional and spiritual health are going to be so important as they lead the congregation through this transition,
Yeah.
because they're navigating their own personal transitions
Right.
uh, as
Yeah.
well. And it's stressful. It's
Yeah.
draining. And
Yeah.
and so how are we going to care for the exiting pastor and the incoming pastor, because they both have stress? Uh,
Yeah.
how do we care for them? How do we help the exiting pastor and their spouse think through their next season? How do we
Yeah.
celebrate him or
Hmm.
her and their
Yeah.
family? And then how do we welcome and care for the incoming family?
Yeah.
So I want to stop. I know I just said a whole bunch
Yeah.
of stuff there.
Those
Give
are
me
all
some of your
great things.
thoughts.
Well, I think again, there's no way in a 30-minute podcast you're going to do a
Mhm.
conclusive job on something that's this infinite, right?
That's
But the
right.
questions begin conversations. The conversations, begin solutions. And I love the thought that it's not going to be the outgoing pastor picking a successor, or again, three board members choosing something as large as this. The community, the congregation, if there's a staff, the staff, all they have to be involved in this. And it
Yeah, I
it, it
agree.
isn't involved like we're going to vote and it has to be unanimous, but leadership, leading the process, leading the prayers, leading and that way I think the greater the investment of the group, the greater the buy-in to the new leader versus,
Agreed.
no one ever let me vote on when my favorite teacher was sick, who the substitute teacher would be. So we treated the substitute teacher like a substitute teacher. you
Uh,
know, they didn't want to be there. We didn't want them there, and everybody knew it. Well, I mean, we dare not do that to our congregations where we bring in a substitute teacher that we had no, not even, we weren't allowed to make input. They just were assigned to our class.
yes.
That sets everybody up for an unnecessary series of potential failures. So
Here's
getting
what's going to
people into it.
happen,
Yeah.
Jim, in that scenario. Here's what often happens is there's
Yeah.
a mass exodus of
Yes.
people
Yeah.
who feel like they had no input at all.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, like you said, this decision was made by three old guys, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah. Who
um,
hired who hired a fourth old guy because that's the person they could relate to, and and
100,
and miss
well,
that
100% right.
transition. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Well, John, this is so helpful to us, all of us that are listening, because all of us are interim pastors. We all have an
Oh, there
expiration
you
date.
go. There
We
you
all have
go.
a season that we get to serve, and handing off that baton to the next generation is very important in the race that we run. So
Mhm.
I know. Why don't you just tell us what would Converge? If I were to call you today and say I'm thinking about landing the plane, what does Converge do for somebody like me?
Yeah. Well, we've really refined the process. We have
Yeah,
a coaching framework actually that we've
yeah,
developed over the years, and it's been developed in the trenches of
yeah,
doing this.
yeah,
And so we have a wonderful framework that we bring to that. And usually a pastor, like most of these pastors that we've worked with transition, this is usually, Jim, a year.
yeah,
They're walking with us for about a year and a half usually. So just so
yeah,
you know, it's not a 3 session deal and you're good to go.
yeah.
It's just not how it
No,
works. And sometimes that
yeah,
works like that. People spend 3, 4 sessions with us. They get everything they need. They're good. In this kind of scenario, now we're talking about, probably a good 18 to 24 months of working with a
yes,
coach. And you might think, well, I don't know if we have the budget for that. Um, you know, I don't mean to be a prophet of doom, but if you drop the baton in this transition,
yeah,
um, just the financial repercussions
yeah,
alone, it's the numbers are so out of whack. We know
yeah,
this that the cost of a transition, if it's a healthy scenario, Jim, is usually the average of that pastor's annual salary. So if a pastor
mhm,
makes 60,000,
yeah,
the cost of that transition will probably be around $60,000. If it's
yeah,
an unhealthy or a toxic transition, traumatic transition, that number goes way up.
yeah,
And there is also a real threat to the loss of income if it's a toxic situation. So
yeah,
please, 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 please
yeah, yeah,
don't save a penny, to spend a dollar, so to
right,
speak.
yeah,
Yeah. So the Lord has just given us some skill around this, a lot of experience with it.
right,
And we feel pretty confident, not pretty confident. I'm 100% confident
yeah,
that if a pastor will
mhm,
go through this process honestly and prayerfully and carefully, they're going to figure out their next season.
yeah,
And we believe that the next season is going to be a wonderful place for them.
yes, it's exciting. Everything in the future is exciting. Yeah, yeah. People who
Yep.
say they can't afford marriage counseling often have to afford divorce lawyers. So
Right.
let's not do that to the congregations that we serve. John, thank you so much for your wisdom and your insight. And convergecoach.com is there. A 30-minute conversation with you or a member of the team is waiting for all of our listeners and watchers. So if you're hearing, you're like, I think it might be time, I don't know, or hey, it is time, how do I do it well? Converge is there for you with seasoned people, vetted processes, references can be provided.
Yeah.
Where we can bring you friends that will tell you if it hadn't been for that guidance, we would not have experienced the good things that we did. So we're here for you. We love you. We're praying for you. And we are on your team, on your side, as you continue to lead from alignment.